Welcome again to Leadership is Me, the podcast where personal evolution meets the realities of business leadership. I am your host, Dahlia, an executive coach and HR strategist, as well as your guide to raw, real conversations with everyday entrepreneurs who chose to rise. So, in every episode, we're going to just really unpack the mindset shifts, structural habits, as well as bold decisions that transform not just business, but the leaders behind them. Because leadership is not just about titles, it's about how you show up when no one's watching. So if you're navigating growth, leading without a blueprint, or simply trying to build something bigger than yourself, you are definitely in the right place. So let's get into it. Today, I am talking with Katelyn. She's a fractional chief of staff of Cadre. And that name to me is so beautiful. So I'm definitely going to pick her brain about where that name comes from. She helps founders and teams connect strategy with execution. And she ensures that they can scale without losing sight of their mission and their people, which is definitely something that even in my line of work is so missing. So I want to say just again how excited I am to talk to you today. So hi, Katelyn, how are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me, Dahlia. This is great.
No problem. So happy and excited to have you on. So before we dive into your leadership journey and I start picking your brain, why don't you just take like the next 30 seconds to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and what you do?
Yeah, so I like to say I'm a strategic doer, but with a heart for humans and a serious bias for action. And that's it really sums me up. If you look at my resume and my career journey, it looks very squiggly. It's a little all over the place. And I've found that the actual running sort of thread and theme through it all is that connective tissue and the humans that kind of bind us through each project and each startup. And so it's for me not so much about the specific startup, the specific industry, but really kind of being the glue force to get stuff done with the humans that we're doing it with.
I'm completely in love with that. And one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you is because I often tell people the title is HR, but I'm more human than resources because I agree with you. Humans, we are a thread and it doesn't change just because you're 40, 50, 60, you're an executive, you're this, you're that. So that thread is definitely consistent. Now, there's something that you said in your bio that I just really want to pick out. So you said that your journey has reinforced that leadership is about adaptability, creating space for others, and embracing the pivots along the way. So talking about the pivot, right? What part of your identity had to shift or had to pivot in order for you to see yourself as a leader?
Oh gosh, so many times, first off. Like I think it's like it keeps happening. It's like Shrek, you're an onion. Like it just keeps happening. I honestly think the really big like ground zero shift for me. And when I say it, a lot of times people get real quiet and they get kind of like, oh, that was dark. And it was dark, but it was my aha moment. And in between the two children I have now, I lost a baby in the middle of my second trimester. And it was a huge deal. Like it just kind of everything changed, everything came down. I was a founder of my own business at the time, and it ultimately even resulted in me actually deciding while carrying my now son, I'm done here. I'm done with this part of the journey and I'm moving on. And so it was a big like identity shift in so many ways that I didn't even know that that's who I thought I was. And then when something like that big happens, you're meeting yourself for the first time again. And you're kind of like, oh, like, hello, what's your name? Nice to meet you. Who the heck are you and why are you here? And so for me, that was a big, big moment. And it definitely allowed for this whole other element of what I do now to sort of come alive and connect with other teams and people in a way that wouldn't have been possible prior. So in many ways, as sad and dark as that chapter feels and sounds, it actually like really illuminated a lot of other gifts for me that now I lean into every day.
I feel so. First and foremost, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that because one, the ability to do that shows leadership and strength because if without vulnerability, it's hard to connect with others that may even be going through, even if it's not something simpler, just something that may hold that level of weight to them. And the willingness to do a me versus me, that's what I call it. When you have these mountain moments where you have to kind of look at yourself and realize that you can do a full about face, or you can, tie your shoes up a little tighter
Yeah.
and move forward, I think is so key and brave. And so I feel like on certain level, I guess my question is, it seems like there was a lot when you go through that you have to then unlearn
Oh
about
yeah.
yourself in order to grow your business or influence. So what were some of the things that you had to unlearn?
I think the big thing is it made me so much softer. And in softness, I found so much strength. And I think that I had to unlearn that I had to be rigid and cold and hard and all muscle to be considered strong. And suddenly, I mean, you even think about the physical changes that happen to us as women when we have children, when pregnancy has happened. And, whether you have that baby on earth side or not, your body changes and it softens. It physically softens. There's a hormone that will do that in our body. And yeah, it's like the same cycle and process that's literally creating a life, brain tissue, a nervous system, all of these things. So it actually is an incredible strength. And so I had to kind of like rewire my brain on what strength meant to me. And also, like you said, bravery, what bravery meant to me. I think that I thought, it was just kind of like work really hard, push through it all, do things solo, be very independent, all that stuff. And that got me up to a point, totally.
Mhm.
A bunch of great experiences doing that. And then it was to a point. And it was like, oh, hello, rest of the world and everything else out here. And so I think now it's like the depth that has expanded since leaning into the softness of it all is just, I mean, it surmounts anything else that I've experienced in my life. And I feel like I've been able to just really like see people where they're at now and meet them where they're at and build from there, as opposed to this like striving outside of ourselves phenomenon, if you will, all the time that like it somehow has to come outside of me and it's this external thing and everything. And now it's like, no, very come as you are energy.
I was going to ask, and I think you started to lean in that direction. Like, how does that unlearning, that process that you went through, show up in how you work with your clients?
Yeah. So I remember this was earlier on in my career, and I remember having a mentor, and I was working on a project in historical Santa Fe. And anybody who knows about Santa Fe, it's the oldest city in the United States. So the historical district has a very strong dominance on what can and can't be done. And I was working on a project that had never been done before in Santa Fe. And there was a particular committee member in it who wrote a scathing review about what I had created for the community. I'm very, very upset. And I remember just panicking when I saw it. And I remember my mentor just telling me, Katelyn, when somebody screams like that, it means you stepped on a nerve. And maybe it's actually a really good thing, like think about it that way. And so I think like a lot of times with the unlearning, it's like maybe you've stepped on a nerve. And if it hurts, if it makes you want to scream, if you feel friction or tension, maybe we should explore why. Because maybe there's something there. Somebody I work with now, even the other day, said, have you ever noticed that none of our breakthroughs seem to come on the good days? And I'm like, yeah, you're kind of right. Like it is, it's when you're willing to step on the nerve that suddenly it's like, light bulb moment. And then we can work through that friction and get to flow.
So again, you started saying something because I was going to ask you, how did others respond when you started to walk into your newness? Like maybe not even just strangers, but especially those that we knew, because sometimes living in that space, it's safe, right? We're safe, we're accepted. People, similar to how you talk about the place being historical and there were just rules and regulations, right? That A lot of times we put ourselves in that box to make others comfortable. So once you started to walk into that ownership, how were you embraced or challenged and rejected?
So it was both, and it depended on who it was we were talking about. But I had on one end, and some of these were some people that know me better than anyone, and some of them frankly totally rejected it, where it was like immediate pushback and immediate questioning. I think what's really interesting about that when that happens is when actual change happens in somebody. I found it's this little catalyst that sort of ticks away at everybody else in order to, it's almost like the universe is asking you, like, do you really believe in that?
Yes.
Is that really the change you want to make? Like, I'm going to test you almost.
Yeah.
And I for sure experienced that from a lot of people. And then on the other side, just as many people, and sometimes unsuspectingly, I was met with empathy and grace and also like a cheering on of, well, hell yeah, we knew she was in there. Like, let's go,
Like,
you
thank
know?
God.
Yeah, let's go. Oh, I knew you could get angry and saucy. I want to see it, And so that would be interesting too. And that was like also like I felt like a lot of times confirmation too from the universe, and also confirmation of maybe why I believed otherwise about myself prior, of like, oh, go easy on yourself. You had a limiting belief in you that maybe you would be rejected if you made this change. Maybe you would be, causing some kind of disruption, not in the sexy way, but in the way that really upsets people, like, And then when they would celebrate it, you'd kind of be like, oh, I can trust this a little bit more. That's okay. Like, you're right. I am mad and I'm going to be mad now. And let's see where this takes me.
I just in total agreement that I think we will live in a box, or we'll put ourselves in a box for the safety of others. It doesn't even have anything to do with ourselves. Like, we're really concerned and focused about how someone else will potentially perceive us, or how we will make others feel. But a lot of times, self leadership is something that we don't even think about, right? We don't even think about that technically the only person that we need to be leading into this promised land or this promised identity is ourselves. And yeah, you're going to come across rose bushes with thorns, but most of the garden is beautiful flowers, right? It's like, it's not right. It's not all rocks and thorns. There's daisies and daffodils, but we don't see all of those because we can focus a lot of times on the thorns.
Yeah.
So, what is one boundary
Mm.
that changed the game for not only your mental health as you were again stepping into your ownership, but has also really impacted your business success?
I think, and it connects to just what you were saying right before, but I think there's this new boundary, and I keep finding more depth in it. So it's something I'm still exploring. But in a weird way, the boundary is unapologetically and authentically showing up as myself and just ruthlessly doing that. It's kind of like, that's what it is. That was my answer. That was my whatever. And here's the thing about myself. I know I'm kind. I know I'm empathetic. I know I'm very human. So I can ruthlessly, unapologetically show up as my authentic self and know that that's still going to be presented and received in a way that's not causing any damage to anybody else. But I feel like when I have maybe sacrificed that boundary or let it be more nimble than it should be, that's when I've actually hurt myself, but also hurt my teams around me. I've worked with somebody who's called it leaky boundaries before. And so like a big
Oh,
like, patching up those leaks, restuccoing the walls. Like that's been a big part. And so a lot of times it's like when I will start to feel like my cup's really low, or I'm like just tired or frustrated. I don't know why it is, but it just feels like it's so depleting and taking from you. That's like my first sign that I'm like, ooh, somewhere I have a leaky boundary and I need to like find it before the whole ship sinks. So like, where is it? What do we need to patch it up? And so thinking about that too.
You said something about, you know that you're nice, you know that you're empathetic. And I think a lot of times clients don't realize that embracing your own authority of who you are actually helps reinforce your ability to have boundaries,
Amen.
right? Like you don't, but right, because it's like I have no need to question the boundary because I know I have operated as my authentic self up until that particular point in time.
Yeah.
So like even when you're working with your clients, how do you help them see that correlation between authenticity of self and boundaries?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think that there's in business especially, but I could argue in all wakes of life, but when you have, let's take your founder, your CEO, to be at the core central nervous system of the business and in that kind of role, you have to have alignment of values. And that's not just like, what's the company's mission and values? But like the core backbone, nitty gritty, what is the value? And oftentimes, I would argue always in a truly successful business, one of those leaders, their core value is the same core value of that company. They
Mhm.
match, they align, and they stick to it. And so a lot of times it's like rerouting back to the value. What's the core value? What's your core value? Who actually are you? And what matters to you? And don't get distracted by the rest. And so a lot of times it's actually less is more of pulling away from all the extras and there's a gazillion things we could try and do. There's tons of efforts we could put out there. But if they don't perfectly match and align to what that core essence is, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time and you're wasting your energy and you're creating a leaky boundary.
How did you figure out what your core boundaries were?
Mm, gosh. I think motherhood did that to me.
Won't
Those
it?
babies just chew you up and spit you out, man. Like, and a lot of times, so early on into having my firstborn, my daughter, I really enjoyed cultural anthropology and sociology and all of that from a very young age, studied it. And so there was an anthropologist, and she wrote this whole concept and invented a word called matrons. And essentially, it means the making of a mother as she's going through motherhood and kind of the
Mm.
developing of all of it and how it all happens at once. And so I hung on to that word and that process because that was like another moment where you have this baby and nobody gives you an instruction manual. And the instruction manuals they do give you do not work, by the way. Don't even waste
Like,
your
who
time on
wrote this?
that. Yeah. And you're just you're meeting yourself again for the first time. And it's super raw and it's very real. And then you're looking at like this mini you too, hoping you don't screw her up also. It's a wild experience. And so I think with that, a lot of times the process of motherhood and matrons is like, I'm being made in it as it goes along. And I keep meeting different chapters of myself, for better or worse. They keep showing up. And I think ever since becoming a mom, for sure.
So I have to go back to something because I definitely don't want to forget. So you said you mentioned holding on when you held on to that word. I want to go back to the name of your business,
Yeah.
Cadre. Like, where does that name come from?
Yeah, so that name, way, way, way back, originally, Latin root was quadris with a Q. Then it became an Italian word, quadro. And then the French evolved it into cadre, and now it's used in the English language. A really like simple sort of Webster dictionary definition of it is a small, special, specific group of people trained for a specific purpose. And so when I think about that with what I do and the teams I get to work with and the humans that I get to evolve with, is that it's like cadre for the collective, right? And so it's a lot about being the connective tissue and being the sort of synergistic group of people of all the right dots getting connected to be able to move vision into possibility, into actual manifested execution, and kind of the sort of like group synergy that has to happen to make those things a reality.
So speaking of like movement and synergy, like when did you realize that being busy was not the same thing as being productive?
Oh my God. I had a sand volleyball coach that I would train with in the summers. She was a pro AVB player. She's an awesome human being. Kelly Van Winden, shout out. But she repeats in my head constantly because she was right. And she would yell at me and say, you know, dang it, Katelyn, like play smart, don't work, or play smart, don't work hard, or however it was. I can't even speak right now, but I think you get what I'm saying. And so oftentimes with that, I'll think about that where I'm like, and I remember as a youth hearing it and really fighting against it, of just being like, I'm out here at 5 a.m. in the morning in the sand, training, then headed to club practice, then headed to this thing, da, 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 da. It takes hard work. What are you talking about? Like, it's not all about just like being smart. And so it would get me kind of like frustrated. And then now I think again, like having kids, it was like, oh, if we don't like strategize a
A
little
strategy.
bit
I was going to say the
and
strategy to this.
wise up. Yeah, exactly. Like we don't get really real about what time is actually in the day and what energy mommy really has and doesn't have. It doesn't matter how hard I work. I am simply going to just work myself into the ground, like, period. And so then for me, it became more of a connection of starting to see a commonality of when things would actually get done, but then actually make an impact. And the common thread with that was somebody or a team pairing the doing with the strategy and finding this like really cool rhythm between the two, because I've worked on a lot of teams and a lot of projects, and it's like we've got all the strategy people on the bus, we have none of the doers on the bus, or vice versa, and guess what, nothing happens, nothing gets manifested into reality. So I found it's like this rhythm between the two that suddenly starts to happen, that you're like, okay, here we go. So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, Dahlia, but
No, I completely got it. And I was saying to myself as you were talking at how interesting it is that people either will do and not strategize, or we live in strategy and don't do. Like there's definitely a disconnect. And so a question that I have definitely asked my clients, especially who are either stuck on one side or the other, what do you think the fear is on the other side? Because I feel like there's a fear. Like the doers are fearful of the strategists, and the strategists are fearful of the doers. So where do you think that fear comes from?
so I can say I've always been more of a doer, and it's up until just recently that I've been proactively more and more challenged to dive into the strategy side. So I've been dealing with the fear from the doer side a lot. And I think for me, a lot of times it's twofold. It's I'm going to be asked to work smarter and I'm not going to be smart enough.
Oh, that's good.
My
Mhm.
idea isn't going to be revolutionary. It's not going to be visionary. It seems so high in the sky sometimes. So sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'll just roll up my sleeves. I'll be your muscle. It's okay. I'll be your generator, baby. I'll keep you warm. And so that's, I think, what'll like kind of make me not paralyzed, but step down and kind of go, oof. I feel like there's simpler fear of failing, or of maybe it's not failing completely. Maybe it's even like implementing in a viable, sustainable way, that then they start to think of all of those things it's like an overwhelm that I've seen happen over them, where it's just like, I don't know, I just had the idea. So like, I just had the idea, I'm throwing it out there. Please let me do it, you know? And that's kind of more of what I've watched them do over time. And then I think it is more of a paralysis that'll happen sometimes, where they're just like, I'm just going to keep spitting out the ideas then, because the idea of getting into all of the bullet points is overwhelming me. So I've got to step out.
I actually think we both have the same type of fear. It just is showing up differently. It's kind of, as you said, the doer is very fearful of, which is such a powerful way to say it, of maybe I don't have the intelligence or the skill for the strategy, so I fear I'm going to fail at that. The strategist fears like, my idea is going to fail. So therefore I need to live in this place of either strategy or perfectionism, to make sure that I've crossed every T, even the T's that don't exist, and I've dotted the I's, the Q's, and the Y's to make sure. So I know a lot of times when I'm talking to clients, when we boil it down, it's like both sides are fearful of the same thing, which is not going to manifest in the way that I envisioned it or that I saw
Not gonna
myself
get done.
running.
Right.
Yep, down
Yeah.
the street.
Yeah.
So understanding that, especially as a doer that's moving into the strategy space, like what systems or habits are you implementing that are helping you continue to not only, lead your personal life, but now leading this life in business intentionally? Because as you said, it's perfect to be a doer. Doers are extremely effective. But in order to run the business effectively, and I say we because I feel like I'm a natural doer as well, we have to step into that strategist role. With me shaking and all, we still just have to do it. So what do you put in place to help yourself with that?
There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things just recently too that I've been implementing and I've been seeing huge changes in. And what's funny is I used to fight all of those things. They're not new to me. I knew about them. And I just was like, but
Yeah,
you don't
I'm
do
good.
that over here. Yeah. Turns out we do. And there's a reason. So, give it a shot. A couple things. So at the end of the day, I am what you'll call a connector. And so there's a couple things with that. I have a huge strength with being that chameleon, adapting, making people feel like they can have permission to be themselves, all of those wonderful things. But where the room gets loud for me is when I'm tapping into all of that and I didn't take time to tap into me. And then suddenly I can't hear my own voice. And so a lot of my work lately has been finding moments before and after I'm going to interact with a team or even an individual to get things straight with myself where I'm at now. Something I do is I take about 5 minutes before that interaction is going to happen and I get my logistical objective brain on. What am I going in for this? What's my intent for this meeting? What's my goal? What am I bringing to the table? And I pull the emotion out a little bit of just, let's look at it all on paper. And then after the call, no matter how great and outstanding it was, how maybe hard and emotional it was, whatever it was, I take at least 5 minutes to check back in with me. So sometimes it can be as simple as me just being like, you know what? I'm literally going to go through my 10 affirmations I've been working with lately, and I'm just going to go through them until I feel my sort of number raise. And then when I feel it raise, then I'll open up my laptop and I'll get to the next task. I think the other thing that I have found is so simple, but right when I wake up, those first few minutes, and right before I fall asleep, those first few minutes, my phone's not out. I'm not going through task lists in my head. I'm not thinking what anybody else needs from me. I'm literally just checking in. And that's been a helpful sort of shift in realigning the rest of the day.
Everything that you just said is key because sustainable leadership is built on systems. And so even as we're talking about being a doer, these are systems that you have actually created, like strategic systems that you've actually created for yourself. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which was understanding exactly who you are. Right. I think a lot of times we'll say, well, such and such does this, so let me just take their entire system and try to make it work for me. When the reality is such and such or person X could be a completely different personality style that doesn't need a check-in moment. Like I learned, similar to you, my evening consists of just a candle. Before I go to sleep, it's just a candle burning. And I'll just lay there. And of course, they're all like beautiful smells. Normally I will wake up about an hour later and have to, put it out.
Nice.
But
Yeah.
it's just that moment of peace and quiet, as you said, just to check in with yourself. And so it's key because, again, leadership, it's all about systems, it's all about habits. And these are things that, you can't just allow others to plant into you. You have to, be willing to plant like into your own garden.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
You see those like seeds finally start to grow too. That's the thing. Like for a while, when you first start some of the stuff I just talked about, at least me, I was like, how much time am I wasting on this? Like, what am I, like I literally was saying that where I was like watching the minutes go by on my computer, like, I can't believe I just lost 15 minutes to this and I could have had X, Y, and Z done. And that, but it was about consistency and like just sticking with it. And then all of a sudden it's like a shift happens and you start to see the seeds that you sowed grow. And then you've got to make sure you weed the garden after that for sure.
right.
That's the thing. If you don't weed the garden afterwards, it's all going to go back to what. So yeah.
Yeah, there's an old saying my mother used to say, a watch pot doesn't boil. Like, you put some water on the stove, you just stand there and stare at it. Like it'll seem
So
like it's taken hours for it
true.
to boil. And that does kind of help with like self-development. Like the more you do it, sometimes like you'll just wake up one day and realize that you feel different or you're walking a little taller.
Noticed that sometimes those around you actually start to notice the change before you do too.
Very
I've had
key.
that happen many times where there's certain people and they'll be talking with me and all of a sudden they're like, you've had a glow up, something happened, you know what? And I'm like, what? And
What?
what I've been up to, they have no idea. And then I'll kind of reflect out of it afterwards. I'll be like, I have felt different lately, but I haven't said anything. And then, and that'll happen sometimes where it's like they can kind of like, it's like that animal thing. I was talking with this about somebody the other day of like the same way that animals can smell fear. I think they can smell authenticity too. And they can also
hmm
smell just the shifts. And we are all animals. So they can pick it up on you when something's different and shifting.
So, being a mom, being a business owner, if you had to pick one habit, one strength that you feel is most important for you to either leave a legacy for your children or even into your business, what would that be?
Be yourself. Be yourself. Like there is not enough time, resources, energy in the world to be anything else. And you literally are not gifting anybody a thing when you do otherwise. I see it in my kids all the time where they don't have those filters up on them yet. And I truly believe decided to come into this world because they knew who they were and they were ready to shake things up, And I think a lot of times it's like my job as their parent, and a lot of times my job in business for leaders are the same in that it's to keep that intact for them of remembering how important and true that essence is, because that's what actually gets things done and moves things through.
So, being yourself, being authentic, has it ever cost you something? And if so, was it worth it?
Yes and yes. Yeah, I think probably many times if I sat down for a while and like really thought about it, I could think of plenty of times, I'm sure. I know I lost a very dear friendship to me because of that, exactly. And when I think about it, it still hurts because we were close and it was just like a dear once in a lifetime type of friendship, but it still was worth it. It's what we both needed. And my truth still wouldn't have changed, is the reality. So I would be going against everything I'm saying if I
Mhm.
had concealed it, and then I'm kind of not offering an authentic friendship at that point either, which means I'm not actually really being a good friend. So I do feel like while it's unfortunate, that was maybe the result. And then in an ideal scenario in utopia, we would hope that I would blurt out my truth and it would all be okay. I just still don't regret that. And when I think about business, I think that early on, I was in my mid-20s when I had my first child. And as we've talked about, everything has changed. and it did. It was a whirlwind. And I found myself having to like speak up in the business world about that and realizing that the weight of a diaper bag was too much for a lot of people to handle around me, and had to walk away from a lot of jobs and work connections. And that one, 1,000% was totally worth it. I would have never have done all the things I did afterwards. I would still be working in an office, probably for about 5K more than I was then, like it wouldn't have manifested into much. So it definitely was like the catalyst to a lot of adventures.
I often say that authenticity invites connection, not perfection. And as we continue to grow within ourselves, it is a hard pill to swallow that some of the relationships were not based on our authenticity. Even a very long, like lifelong, I've experienced that as well, lifelong friendships.
Mhm.
That the moment you really start to, again, plant the seeds in your own garden and be intentional about it and begin to operate within your most authentic self, that it starts to bump up against those relationships that may have been pretty flowers, but had a lot of thorns that we were willing to overlook because we weren't the ones tilling the garden.
Right,
Right. We were right. We were just allowing the garden to just grow. Nobody was
right.
cutting the grass. It was just like,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
right, whatever. And
absolutely.
then you look up one day and you're like, oh, like I thought this was pretty, but it's taking all the nutrients out from this whole
The
section.
bees are choking this tree. Yeah, right.
Right.
That
Right.
flower, that rose bush is looking underwatered. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it can be hurtful, but sometimes that growth and pain sometimes definitely go hand in hand. But as you said, it's worth it. It's just like when you use the analogy of like the rainstorm. It's not pleasant, especially if you're driving in it, but the earth has been cleaned. There's a rainbow in the sky. The air feels fresh, but it took that storm, for it to happen. When
Mhm.
you think about where you started versus where you are now, is your definition of success still the same?
No. No, and it probably will change again. But no, I've really started out with all the examples given to me. It's all I ever saw was the harder you work, the more things will pay off. Like just work really hard, be the hardest worker in the room. But I now almost, when somebody says, "You're the hardest worker I know," if they say that to me, it's actually an immediate, I need to take a step back.
Big
And
red flag.
yeah, yeah, like where's my leaky boundary? Because when
Right.
I said that, something's up, and so now it's like completely shifted that when somebody says that, I literally am like, ooh, I need to put a personal day on my calendar and go do something completely unrelated to work and get back in touch with something because I'm leaning again, I'm overdoing it. And so that's really shifted big time. And I think that just like you said, it's for me, it's much, much more rooted now with success of connection over perfection, always, where it's like, I think that when you really do just like show up in that way, as opposed to having it all perfect or working the hardest, it actually allows for room within that structure for more creativity to happen and more maybe even unexpected things that, shift your whole trajectory.
So what would you tell someone? And so there's someone listening, it feels like, I'm scared of connection. I don't think I have it in me to lead. Like, what would you tell them?
Oh gosh. So first off, I felt like I was experiencing being that person for, close to the last 5 years. I definitely went into like a protective, sort of very quiet silo mode. And I think that was a buildup of life events. That was my miscarriages, that was COVID, that was closing my business, just kind of a lot of things where I was like, I need to go inward for a while. And part of that really served its purpose for it. But I think that there's a point where being like the lone wolf in something just isn't sustainable, and it isn't sexy anymore, and it isn't fun. Like, I mean, you just get to a point where that's lonely. It's kind of miserable, you know? And so there's an interesting time when that starts to shift for you, that I feel like even though it's very scary, it's good to remember that it's literally rooted in fear. Like when you start to feel the fear, what narrative are you creating in your head right now? And then once you know that narrative, then I would challenge yourself. That action usually dissipates fear. I remember recently I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get like back active on LinkedIn. I hate LinkedIn, guys. I hate it. I hate it. It is like, not my jam. But I need to get back on there. And I was starting to realize it's time to connect again with people. It's important. And so I remember just not too long ago being like, I have to put up a post. Like, oh God, what is that going to be about? And just agony over it. The moment I just pressed send and was like throwing it to the wind, it's done, it's out there. It's like all of my fears were gone. I wasn't met with any kind of animosity. Everybody was just celebratory of it. It became easier to do the next time, And so it was just kind of like that one small action. And then suddenly I was able to make it a habit. And then now I don't agonize over it. Now I actually look forward to it. And it's all good now.
Yeah, I often share that, just like a car, there's only one person driving. And most of the time, we like to think our permission needs to drive, our being comfortable is driving, when the truth is our action is actually driving the car. Permission, comfort, all of them are sitting in the back seat, just waiting for action to get us like where we actually need to be. And then they show up, right? So it's the action that helps take you from point A to point B. It's the action that gives you the comfort, the security, the confidence. Lean into, as you said, just the action of it all. And then, like you said, let the wind blow it wherever it needs to blow. It does not affect your ability to breathe in the very next 60 seconds, right? It's just like, okay, it's something that I did and I can now move on and attempt to do something else, or I'll wake up and try this again tomorrow. So, what part of your story do you hope really reminds someone that they can do it?
It feels weird that this is my answer, but I think I come back to grief, like human grief. It's like a very distinct thing, and there's different ways and different reasons for it and everything, but it's really real and it's raw. And I think that whatever it is that anybody is going through, that they can know that because there's grief there, it means there's a whole lot of love and like a whole lot of very true, authentic love. And that is sort of an outcome. I don't want to say that's at the other side, because I don't think there's like this magical tunnel you get through with stuff when you're feeling the things. But I think that it's like, if you know you're feeling those things and you're experiencing the world in that kind of way, it's like, I think you're real. Does that sense? Like, then you're real. So if you're real, it's like then your actions can really do something. And I feel like you can ground yourself in that. Of you wouldn't be able to feel that if there wasn't a huge core part of you that is tied to something bigger or more meaningful.
That's beautiful. And again, thank you for, being vulnerable and sharing your journey and your story. So when you look in the mirror, what makes you say that leadership is me?
Okay. I was thinking about this. What keeps coming to me is actually all of my imperfections, because they're all actual results of showing up and being weathered through life and the world. And I think about like literally looking at myself in the mirror. And I'm like, what is the dialogue that sometimes goes through my head? And there is a dialogue, and sometimes that dialogue is a bigger critic than it needs to be, or is harsh or cruel or whatever. And then there's other times where it's like, yeah, well, that extra wrinkle, is because I laugh really freaking hard when something happens and I make light of it all. Or those extra pounds around my hips. Turns out they make babies, like pretty cool. And so I guess just the imperfections are like kind of the things that make me me. And then because of that, I get to go and like make impact with other people. And we get to make real things happen. Pretty cool.
That's beautiful. And once again, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story as well as your insight today. Like your journey is such a powerful reminder that leadership, as you just said, it's not about perfection in any way, shape, or form. It's about embracing all of the bumps and curves, the happy highs, and sometimes the really sad lows that come along with it. But it all, if you embrace it, it all helps you grow, again, even despite the mess. So before we wrap up, where can people find you and what, if anything, do you have on the horizon?
Yeah, so everybody can find I am working on an actual landing page so that there's more things to interact with, but it's not ready. Speaking of the imperfections and the mess, but right now anybody can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's always welcome. And then also just via email, cadreoperations@gmail.com. And I love getting to chat with anybody about all of this stuff. And on the horizon, I'm just really focusing on working with teams who are ready to just make impact and are ready to show up and helping build those systems and those inner workings and identify their culture carriers, all that good stuff, and kind of come in and out of several different teams and see what we can do and get cranking.
Beautiful. So once again, I'm so grateful that you joined me. I know that someone who's listening is walking away with like a new level of probably courage and clarity just because of what you shared. And to everyone else that's tuning in, thank you again for being here with another episode of Leadership is Me. I will post all of Katelyn's information on the closer page, so you will be able to see her email links, etc. And if today's conversation lit you on fire, share it, reflect on it, but most importantly, act on it. As she said, take some time for you. Look at yourself in the mirror and learn how to just be okay with what you see and realize that it's more power in that than trying to change who you naturally are. And remember, sustainable leadership is not built overnight, right? It's built through intention, identity, and the willingness to evolve. And the leader that you're looking for is already inside of you. So if you'd like to be featured on the next episode of Leadership is Me, send us an email at leadershipisme@gmail.com or simply follow the links that again will show on the final screen. And again, until next time, get empowered, continue to evolve, but most importantly, execute. Talk to you later. There's an art to imperfection that a lot of us are afraid to draw for ourselves, right? We see grief and we automatically define it as something negative. We look at our physical imperfections and we try our best to change them or use them to compare ourselves against others. But what if those imperfections are the things that make you actually unique and special? Katelyn talked about everything that she has gone through. And a lot of those things, most people will allow it to throw them off. But leadership at the end of the day is about embracing the things that happen to you and finding the strength to continue to move forward. Finding the lessons that not only can you apply to your personal life, but that you can apply in your business. Don't run from your imperfections. As a matter of fact, the more you embrace your imperfections, the more you'll understand others' imperfections as well and figure out how to help them. Figure out how to help your employees and figure out how to help your business. So that's my challenge for you today. Embrace your imperfections and see how far it can actually take you. Until next time.